Hello everyone, this is Gar McVey-Russel coming to you from Oakland, California. I hope that you are doing well and taking care of yourself during this health crisis. Please be safe. Sheltering in place is a good time to read books, and I want to show you mine. Before I do, I want to thank Saints and Sinners for this opportunity to share my work, and to thank the bookstore Tubby and Coos for making my book available. You'll find their link along with this video. My novel came out a couple of years ago. It's called Sin Against the Race. There it is. It is the story of a young African-American named Alfonso Rutherford Berry III, the son of a city councilman and the grandson of the state's first African-American legislator. Alfonso's coming out brings him into conflict with his father, Councilman Ford Berry, and his church. But Alfonso also finds support from friends of his late cousin, older cousin Carlton, who died of AIDS just before the time of the story, and from new friends his own age he meets at college. Alfonso gets involved with a needle exchange project his late cousin started, causing a major rift with his father, who kicks Alfonso out of the house. Later in the story, the needle exchange is broken up by the police, and Alfonso gets beaten and falls into a coma. I'll read a section now on how his parents react to this event, starting with the reaction from his mother. As the machines hummed quietly, as Billie Holiday sang softly, this is in the hospital, but the house, Eunice made a phone call. In the story. Hello, is this Charlotte Hunter? Yes. This is Eunice Berry. We met at the hospital last Saturday. Mrs. Berry, Charlotte sat up. Is there news on Alfonso? No, nothing's changed, dear. Listen, I hope it's okay that I call you. Mr. Turner gave me a number. I hope you don't mind. No, not at all, Mrs. Berry. Charlotte, I'm trying to find out what happened Saturday night and who's responsible for beating my son, and I'm getting nowhere. The police department is stonewalling me, and I'm not getting any traction at City Hall. I need to know who did this and why. Why would anyone beat an unarmed person senseless? I understand completely, Mrs. Berry. How can I help you, though? You were Councilman Larkin's top aide. Are you still in touch with him? Because I believe that there are people who will still listen to him. He held a lot of sway in City Hall. Do you think he can help me? I'm at my wit's end. I certainly am in touch with him, Mrs. Berry. I talk to him regularly. She paused for a second, then added, He's advising me on my campaign. Charlotte's running against Alfonso's father and Eunice's husband. Good, Eunice said. Would it be possible for him to try and find out what is going on in terms of an investigation? Because I'll tell you something, my biggest fear is that they will try to do something behind closed doors for the sake of not embarrassing my husband. And that is not going to get it done. Not as far as I'm concerned. She paused, sighed. This has not been a great time for my family. I haven't dealt well with his coming out as I could have. And now all this happened. She paused again, collected herself. You knew Carlton, right? Yes. About a month ago, my sister Imogene, Carlton's mother, just burst into tears while we were having breakfast together. She kept mentioning Carlton indirectly as we talked, and then she just fell apart. I could hear the guilt in her voice. She kept trying to blame Carlton for separating himself from the family, when in reality, she knew that none of us made it easy for him. Charlotte, I keep seeing myself in my sister's place, crying over a dead son that I did not allow myself to know. I swear to God, I will never forgive myself if I let that happen. One way or another, I will know my son, and I will help him. Charlotte took a deep breath. Mrs. Berry, I can help you with this. I can meet you this morning. Let me make some arrangements and I will call you back, but I will help you with this. Thank you, Charlotte. Eunice hung up and put her cell phone down. She stared at Alfonso's face, then closed her eyes. So later that day, she holds a press conference with former Councilman Larkin, James Larkin. Mrs. Berry asked for my assistance yesterday in finding some answers to this terrible tragedy that happened to her son Alfonso. I am here to announce that the mayor has appointed me chair of a blue ribbon panel that will begin investigating what happened that night. The panel will consist of retired members of the police force, the police review board, and community leaders. So after the press conference and then a different time, we now run into Alfonso's father, Ford Berry, going to meet with the Reverend of their church, Reverend Thad Johnson. Ford arrived a half hour later than he said he would. Thad Johnson greeted him with the usual firm handshake and toothy smile. "Something must have kept you in the office," he said jovially. Ford made a weak smile and mumbled unintelligibly. They sat next to each other in front of the big desk. Johnson asked if Eunice would be joining them after all. Ford said no. Johnson asked if she was still spending most of her time in the hospital. Ford said yes. Johnson nodded. "Motherhood is a powerful force for her. Just give Eunice some time and she was at City Hall just now." "What was she doing there?" "You didn't watch the noon news?" Johnson shook his head. Ford filled him in, his voice distant, ghostly, as if it didn't originate from his own body. "Did you get appointed to this blue ribbon panel?" Johnson asked. Ford shook his head. "No." "She wouldn't even look at me, Thad. My own wife would not acknowledge my presence. She looked right through me, like I wasn't even there. Ford, this is incredible. I can't believe Eunice would act this way. She's acting as if what happened to Alfonso was your fault." Ford sat hunched forward, his knees spread wide apart, his elbows heavy upon them, his hands clasped. Then he looked up. "Isn't it?" Johnson reared his head back. "What are you saying, Ford?" Ford stood and began pacing around the desk. "The night Alfonso and I fought, when he told me that he's gay, he said to me, 'You're doing me like Granddad did Ernest Little.' And I slapped him. I wanted to do worse than that." Recalling that moment made him lose his train of thought. He closed his eyes briefly to refocus. "You know about Ernest Little, don't you?" Johnson remained silent. Ford kept pacing. "Ernest looked up to my father so much, and my father trashed him relentlessly. He bragged about it, like it was his greatest achievement. But he took no responsibility for driving him to suicide." He stopped pacing and stood behind Johnson. "My father destroyed Ernest Little, and as God is my witness, He paused and looked up, saw bandages, tubes, wires, stillness in a bed, nothing like the young man he knew. A tear came to his eye. He quickly wiped it away. "Rip him apart, tear him down, shut him up. Isn't that what you said we had to do, Thad?" He shook his head. "My wife told me that she didn't know me anymore." That was the day after Alfonso. His voice trailed off. "Ford, sit down, listen. Eunice is worked up, and I know how upsetting that must be. No, you don't." He loomed over Johnson, power returning to his voice. "You aren't married, never have been. You don't have any children. How do you know how I feel, Reverend?" He described the rush of emotions that filled his mind: birthdays, holidays, trips abroad, moments as a group, moments with just him and his son, their moments in the park. Johnson pinched his lips. "A man's supposed to protect his family. Isn't that what you preach?" "I'm on the city council. I'm on the goddamn motherfucking city council. But my wife had to go to my predecessor to find someone with some balls to investigate what happened to my son. You want to know something, Thad? I wouldn't vote for myself." Ford walked towards the door. "Alfonso was right. I should have played baseball." "Where are you going, councilman?" Ford stopped and turned around, saw bitter sarcasm curl Johnson's lips. He couldn't give a shit. "Don't call me that, Thad. I'm not on the council anymore. I'm resigning, effective immediately." He left Thad Johnson sitting alone in front of his desk, his teeth clenched and hidden. Thank you again for listening, and I hope you're interested to buy the book. Do take care. Be safe.